after. What are you doing, Sim? It looked like you were
Just adjusting. Just adjusting. I just don't want it touching my shirt.
So after the first couple episodes, feedback.
Yes.
Have you? Well, you tell me what you think after watching them, and also what maybe feedback you've got,
Righto.
and then I'll say what I think.
Yep, cool. So after watching both of them, and then hearing feedback from a few people, I think the feedback kind of confirmed what I had seen, which was that even though we were conscious of not just doing a big sort of dump of, I suppose, everything that we'd been thinking of lately, it definitely came across like, I could see how it would come across as we were negative in certain aspects towards the church that we attend, which was definitely not the case or the motive, but certainly acknowledge that, particularly if if you didn't listen to everything, or maybe hadn't chatted to us recently in person, you could see that it would come across like we were being sort of negative. But I suppose for me, like the first episode particularly was around our reasons why, which was all of those things, right? It was a space to talk about all the things that we find interesting, and also the things that are challenging for us to either hear talked about or not hear talked about. So the feedback reflected that, and it was also extremely positive too. Like, so people were talking to me about how it was really refreshing to hear unguarded, honest chat about anything, and and encouraged us to keep sort of keep doing that, and being true to whatever it was that we wanted to talk about. And it's a balance of not thinking too much, but also being aware of how things can come across. So take that on board fully, and I think the nature of what we do from here on in will be more geared around wonder and positivity, because of the fact that we're going to have other people on to chat to, and in some ways, like, we think very similarly, and so we can only be half of the conversation sometimes. So I think playing devil's advocate is something that, if we're just talking, we have to do a bit more, is to spell out what maybe the alternative viewpoint would be on certain matters or issues. And although I feel like we did do that, and we do, I suppose it's just making a conscious effort to bring everyone along that might be listening. You kind of have to do that. But I suppose that's me. Overall positive, but certainly, good feedback. And please, if you gave us feedback, or you gave me feedback, keep it coming, because it's valuable for us to learn.
Yeah. Sim, before I go, did you get any feedback from people?
Probably the point that John just made about perhaps people have listened to part of or all of, but haven't really got the context of having a conversation with either of you before. I think that's probably where I can see people would maybe misinterpret the discussions or the points that were raised, because they've only sort of heard part of it. And I guess I have the luxury of having talked to both of you at length with different things. So when I listen to it, I can hear all the positive stuff, because I don't take any of it really negatively, because it's your observations on your experience. So it can't be really negative if it's seen in that light. But certainly the feedback that I got was just happy to hear candid conversation. So much stuff in our lives are scripted. So to hear something that's sort of unplugged like that is refreshing, and it can just, I guess, you then become a fly on the wall on what, quite a naturally flowing conversation. So that was certainly what came across, and people were asking when can they hear more. So that's a good thing. So yeah, hopefully, like you said, that there'll be additional people join, which will give different perspectives, and maybe, like you were saying earlier, maybe an opportunity to do a live one, Mark, and then
Yeah.
people can ask questions during. Like, I mean, I don't know how this technology works, but certainly that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other night, John, and they said, "Oh, it would be cool if you could have live call-ins." And I said, "Well, there's a lot of complexities to that. The software does allow it, but also you'd have to have the show, like it's
You had
9:30
to
at the
have it.
moment because kids are in bed." It works for
People
us.
would have to be up late. Yeah.
Yeah,
You'd almost need like a Facebook page or a message, something where people could just even text in something.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Or they might say, hey, talk more about that. And then while you're in the current, podcast, you can kind of dive into what people want to hear about, which, would
Yeah.
be interesting.
And I think that the caveat to that would be that unlike dialing or calling into where you have a scientist on a TV show or something, we are no experts. So you may, all you're going to get is what we sort of perceive and think about things. We're not gurus about anything. We're just a couple of idiots that like to chat. So I
I
thought
mean, it might be an opportunity.
I think the funny thing about it is obviously we would love to do that and have conversations with multiple people. This is the best we can do at the moment. And like the other night, all of us and a few others were chatting, and like you said, we think similar. And Sim, you, Beck, we know where we're all at. So when you say things, you can piece it together and you don't have to ask questions. But some of the people we're talking to had questions that were valuable, because it was kind of like we were saying that, but it didn't sound like we were saying it. So then they'd come in and ask the question, and that's what you miss. And probably that's one thing that I noticed, like you, John, looking back at the first couple episodes and trying to put that hat on of being on the other side of the conversation, because we didn't want this to be just our opinions and take it as statement. We wanted it to be half of a conversation that is continued by whoever's watching, whether they talk to people about it or they give us feedback or whatever. There needs to be another half of this conversation, because we're only saying our part.
yeah.
And I think that's a mistake that, it's a pattern, I think, that society has kind of headed into with like posts that you put up, Twitter, videos that are put up. It's all just this one bit of information, right? And people take it on board, and like in churches, talks, a sermon or whatever is given, and it's just taken. When the benefit comes when there's a conversation about what was said, and otherwise you're just left with everyone just shooting their opinions out there, and you take what you like and you get rid of things that you don't understand, rather than those things that you don't understand, or that maybe hit you the wrong way at first, delving a bit deeper to find out why that hits you the wrong way and what that person was meaning. I think that's what I noticed, and similar, like you echoed the similar thing. But I think it's interesting because it's kind of what we didn't want. It was the opposite reason of doing a podcast, but it happens anyway. So for me, it was kind of funny.
Well, there's two things that I sort of didn't say that I'll add now. Respect and passion came across in feedback as well, or it was at least alluded to. So respect, it certainly isn't our intention to be disrespectful of any church, of any history within that church, of individuals that are currently in the church or previously. And I would just implore any listeners to see things through that lens, that we're not being disrespectful when we're being candid. There's certainly an immense level of respect that I've got for many, many people that I know, or people that, I suppose allowed in the history of the organisation that we attend, that allowed us to see certain things that we do. But I think that in an ironical way, it would be disrespectful to them if we didn't look at things the way we are, which is with honesty and through the lens of the Spirit as we see it, our experience and the Scriptures themselves. So, yeah, if there is any listeners that think, we're a bit disrespectful of things, please don't see it that way, because if you see it that way, you'll probably see more of that, and it's not our intention. And, the other part that came across in a little bit of feedback was passion. Like, obviously, doing this podcast is something that we're really enjoying and we will continue to do, but our passion ultimately is to be sharing the gospel, which this is, and also in a real sense, like the community of church, God's church, is important to us. Like, it's not that we're just gone, gathering sort of religious meeting on a Sunday with a group of people that's not our thing anymore, and we're just doing podcasts. That's not at all what we're saying. We're just kind of enjoying chatting, and this is an essential element of our walk in the Lord. It's not our walk in the Lord. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? But that's came across a little bit to me.
Yeah, I think it's like we were talking just before this, and you said a word that's still sticking with me about the gathering together, or the church should be about wonderment. And we have, when you have sound doctrine of salvation, being what we've talked about in the previous podcast, and the Holy Spirit experience, building on that is excitement and wonderment and understanding, and particularly the way I feel that the gospel goes out, preaching the gospel, is being real in who the Lord's made you to be. Being a real person, because He has filled. It talks about it. It says He has made us His witness. Not He has given us words to witness, but He has made us that witness.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose that, and again, to some people listening to our reflections on what we've learnt so far, what I'm about to say could sound disrespectful, but please don't let it be that. There's a saying or a phrase that's attributed to someone that's was a part of our organisation that basically says this: there's two types of talks: how to get saved and how to stay saved. Now, I think the meaning behind that is that there's a focus on salvation, which I absolutely agree with. But I don't think that tells the full story of what it means to, be a new creation. Like what you said there, wonderment. Like there's so many super interesting and encouraging aspects to God's plan, God's nature. The books of the Bible, the narrative, the literature, and I think that wonderment deserves airtime. It deserves thought, and we're saved by grace. We've been wonderfully filled with the Holy Spirit, and moving on from that, remaining excited. Part of that is about wonderment, and when the scriptures say, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, and when you're excited and thrilled about the position that you've, through grace, found yourself in, of course you're going to want to talk to other people that are of the same mind, but also people that you meet in your day-to-day life, which would look more traditionally like preaching the gospel of salvation. But I was speaking to someone today, and it was really interesting that, obviously the Acts 2:38 point in time where the Holy Spirit was poured out on the day of Pentecost to people, and we're beneficiaries of that exact same experience with the same Bible evidence of speaking in another tongue and full water baptism. That was a culmination of the good news that Jesus spoke about. And, Jesus and his message and the things that he spoke about and did, there's a lot of wonder in all of that. And it's important to allow yourself to think outside of like, all right, get saved and then just become insular and try and stay saved, whatever that means to you. Keep attending somewhere, keep not doing certain things. Like, it's more than that. So hopefully that comes across as further episodes unroll.
Yeah. I heard one good thing that I just thought I'd mention too as feedback. Someone said sound doctrine, which we talked about in episode 2. Sound doctrine can't be written down, it's on your heart. I thought that was an interesting one to think about.
Yeah,
but
certainly.
also, you go.
I was just going to say, I got feedback as well. Sorry, a bit laggy. Someone said to me today, sound doctrine to them is salvation. And I don't disagree with that either. Like, salvation is sound doctrine because the method that's prescribed in the scriptures works. There's evidence to be had.
And they left it at that. Is that? They left it at sound doctrine is salvation, full stop.
Yeah. Yep. And I think I'm doing that justice. So sorry to that person if I didn't relay that as accurately. Feel free to give me more feedback. But it's an open-ended thing.
Yeah. One last piece of feedback that I got was that sometimes our expressions seem like we're not interested.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's hard when you don't remember that you're being recorded.
I did get other feedback that they want more jokes about
More jokes.
your childhood.
About John's cross-dressing.
Maya cross-dressing part 2, perhaps.
Maybe we'll do a podcast while cross-dressing. I've got a pretty little pink number that I want to read.
Anyway, so after I think that was probably a good wrap up of what we've learnt so far. It's only been 2 episodes, and I think that's it's pretty cool that we have been able to only record 2 things and learn from it, get feedback, because I hope that we do that the whole way through this. Like that's growth. I think is constantly refining, not getting stagnant in what you do, and just because we could have turned around a lot of that stuff and said, "You're wrong. That's not what we're doing," or "No, we've done it perfectly." But we know we're not. It's just us talking, and um, it's gonna need change.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's the big thing, isn't it? It's like the podcast, or any podcast really, but we want ours to be no different. It's something that it only exists with the listener as the third party, and feedback that comes from them. Otherwise, you and I could just ring each other on the phone, and we wouldn't get that valuable feedback that can shape the way that we think and speak.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not necessarily a podcast. Well, it's not a podcast that we're teaching people. It's just us talking so that people can share in that conversation, have the other side, listen to it, think about it. It's probably not a normal podcast, maybe, but there's all different sorts of things, I guess, and yeah, take it for that.
We're not normal people.
So
Very
what are you
strange.
talking about? Speak for yourself.